Okay, here's a little story from the Wayback Machine, and it kind of involves me, something my dad was involved with actually, and stuff. And I heard about though when I was a kid. I don't know, something got me watching old baseball videos, and then I went back to the time whenever I was a childhood and watched a little thing that I got to be involved with, and went to an All-Star game that was at the Astrodome. But back whenever it was woo. But ended up getting a baseball for it too. But I started baseball through Little League probably after second grade, I think it was, and that was just a Little League type of thing. And then they called it Texas League, but it was Mickey Mantle League. It was actual pitch. It wasn't T-ball or anything. Then, and I was catcher and second baseman, and I did that for 2 years. Then we moved up to the next one, and I was catcher and second baseman. Actually, the very first year I was shortstop, not second baseman, but then I moved over to second base the second year I played. So I don't know, third, fourth grade, here we go. And anyhow, I got to be good friends with the pitcher, and I was the catcher mainly. And whenever this other guy pitched, we would have the guy that was playing second base play catcher, and I would play second base. After a while, we figured out I was probably the better catcher, but I also started pitching. One of the pitchers was the coach's son, and he was like, blah blah blah. If we could have another pitcher in here or somebody, not trying to cut the kids down in any way, but we had somebody that could pitch a little bit better. And he goes, well, he can pitch as fast as I can from his knees, throwing it back to me. He's like, what? And he goes, you've seen him sting it to second base and stuff off of it, da da da, and everything. So they gave me a shot at it, and me and my friends always did this back and forth. I'd catch to their throw, they'd catch to my throw, and we go back and forth. And uh, so we kind of did that. In fact, we even got a catcher's mitt whenever I got to be a catcher, and I got to keep it. And so I had one of those real catcher mitts, and we started playing with that. Whenever we weren't even with the little league type stuff, and I was able to utilize it back and forth. Then you catch for me, I catch for you, blah blah blah, and try to get the thing down, if you will. Anyhow, I ended up being in the All Stars for quite a few years and stuff, and had a pretty good record in that. Maybe I'll tell more about that later as I get into this and explain what connections there are to this guy, because this is a story about the king of the K's. Now, K is a strikeout. When you watch baseball and they put a K up for everyone that has to do it. And of course, what I was watching was a Nolan Ryan shutout that he had done on somebody, a no hitter, and they were putting him up. Boy, bing, 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 bing. Well, there's other stats, though, that go along with baseball that people know about. And most of you who are baseball fans, it says, know about Roger Clemens and Kerry Wood, that they hold the record for the most strikeouts in regulation 9-inning major league game with 20. Now, another interjection here. I hadn't gone to a game in 5 or 6 years, but I went to a Texas Ranger game, and what was his name, Kenny Rogers, whatever, and everybody was hot about him, da da da, and he's going to pitch tonight and everything. We got this way up in the stands thing. A foul ball went up to where we were. We thought it was a boring game to about the third or fourth inning, and then people started getting hyped up and going, you got a no hitter going. And then all of a sudden we started getting hyped up about it. That place went crazy, and whenever he actually got it, wow. Anyhow, but that's a no hitter. That's not how many strikeouts that you can have in a 9-inning thing. And of course, there's 3 strikes and you're out, so 9 times 3 is 27, right? And that record is 20 in that. But you'd have to be a baseball purist or some maven to know that Tom Chaney set the game record with 21 strikeouts in a 16-inning game. So it went into extra innings, but they kept matching each other head for head or whatever, and he got that many strikeouts. Also, Chris and Vitek of Baylor, down here in Waco, Texas, and Eileen Caney of Northwestern, the girls, so it must be softball they're putting in this too somehow, or I don't think she's. Anyhow, hold the NCAA record for 28 strikeouts in a game in 16 innings and 18 innings, respectively. So 16 innings in Baylor had 28 strikeouts, right? But how many of you know that former Dexter kid, which is a little town in Georgia that's probably 100 miles away from Atlanta, how many of you know that a former Dexter kid struck out 28 batters in a 9-inning high school game? No, it's not 20, which is what the record is of any type of sport. Oh, they went into extra innings, and you can pull off that kind of deal, but then that's got an asterisk next to it, and you read it, and it goes, oh, it's a 16-inning game. What about a 9-inning game? Well, it's this kid over here on your left. Because it was a new world record, and it still stands to this day, from what I understand. Millard Whittle of Dexter remembers. Mr. Whittle remembers a lot about things. After all, he has been around these parts for more than 90 years. Mr. Whittle called me and related the story of Hugh Frank Radcliffe. And see, seeing that name Radcliffe, it kicked me off on that story my dad told me. So I thought I'd go into this, and I looked his name up on YouTube, and there's nothing. So I looked his name up regular, and there's almost nothing. But then I found this thing from in Dublin, Georgia, where they've got this, and they're talking about it. And I thought, maybe I'll just pop that out there a little better, just in case anybody ever looks. So this guy tells you he was hooked and logged onto the internet as fast as he could and see what he could find. Well, Hugh Frank Radcliffe was born on November 27th. Let me get this right here. And 1928 in a little town named Fort Valley, Georgia. He spent his early years in the Dexter community. Sometime during the end of the Great Depression, the Radcliffes moved to Thomaston, Georgia. Yeah, if you lived anywhere near there, you don't almost put the A in, which it says Thomaston, like Thomas's town, but they just call it Thomaston. There's a bunch of little towns around there. There's Concord and Zebulon and everything. It's a Pike County, and this is right next to that they're talking about in these county seats, where a bunch of little rural towns would get together and have a major high school that everybody went to, right? It was kind of centralized hub. And this is not too far from Griffin, Georgia, if you know where that is, and that's one of the other places they would play against, along with those people that are over here that Hugh Frank was part of, separate from my parents that grew up. Well, this is where the grandparents lived. They grew up there until they moved away. Dad went in the service and the whole 9 yards. Anyhow, Hugh attended Robert E. Lee Institute in Thomaston. Hugh, or Frank, or Redbone, as his friends called him, was a 4 sports star at R.E. Lee. Radcliffe was an all-state, all-South end, and the best kicker in Georgia. He was an all-state guard in basketball and a state champion in the pole vault, but his main sport was basketball. Now you will see why. And so he did all kinds of things. He was considered to have been like all-American kind of deal before they really had that going on. And my dad, in his high school yearbook, was considered to be all-around sports, which would have been kind of like the same thing. And my mom had that too. But my dad was like, no, this dude, better than he was a pitcher. He actually held like over 400 batting average while he was an incredible pitcher, which is who he is. So Hugh was considered big for his day, standing 6 foot 1.5 inches tall with his cleats on, so he's over 6 foot tall anyhow, and tipping the scale at 185 pounds, so he's pretty big, not necessarily lanky. He was clean cut as any teenager could be at the time. You saw the picture. His coach described him as unimpressed with accolades and one who disdained alcohol, tobacco, and even cream sodas. So he was trying to be fitnessy, at least during this time of his life for sure, leading all into it. It was the year 1948. Hugh was just about halfway through his senior year in high school. As a sophomore, Hugh led his team to the Georgia and Regional American Legion titles. The game was to be played in Macon, Georgia. The Rebels' opponents that day were the Poets from Lanier High School in Macon. The Poets, including future big leaguer Coot Veal, who apparently played in the big leagues, were no slouches. The team had a winning tradition for many years. The Poets no longer had Billy Ensign, a former Dublinite and a high school All-American baseball player. Sporting a 5-game winning streak, Lanier was always strong team, and the date was April 19th. The place was Silvertown Ballpark. So there he goes, making it into it. And here's a picture of him there holding a baseball, and you can see he's got pretty big hands, pretty big kid. You struck out 3 batters in the first inning. The fans and coaches all must have said, well, Frank's on today. Then he struck out 3 batters in the second. Somewhere during the game, he struck out 4 batters in an inning. Some of you might say, well, how can you do that? Well, the reason is simple. Under baseball rules, when a catcher drops a third strike and first base is not occupied and there is less than 2 outs, the runner can advance or run to first base, and if he makes it to first base before he gets the ball and throws you out, that's the reason you'll see if they ever drop one, they pick it up and touch him real quick with it, right? The catcher or another fielder must retrieve the ball and throw it to first base. If the runner beats the throw, he's awarded first base, but the pitcher is given credit for a strikeout. Usually an error is given to the catcher or the pitcher for allowing the runner to advance. But enough of the rules, back to the game. So in other words, you can strike out 4 people in an inning and have your third ball get past you and the guy running get to first base. My dad tells me this story about it, right? That he held the record for it, but it's because he threw the ball so fast and so well. It wasn't that he had some killer curveball, he only had some little one. I'll get to later about that. But he had a fastball that my dad said was so incredible. One example, he said, when they came and played to Pike County, he had to face him batting, which I'll talk about one more time here later. And the pitch went past the catcher, and it hit the backboards, which there were 2x6s, all 1x6s, all stacked up about waist high, and then everything above that was fencing, and you had your stands back there, so you're looking over that, but it was right there. It actually broke the board and went through that and hit the fence, got trapped behind the fence. Yeah, it went right through it. Pow! Like, he must have been throwing it at, around 100 miles an hour. And at this time, growing up when I was a kid, it was like, ooh, Nolan Ryan could throw the ball 100 miles an hour, because they had developed the radar gun, and they had somebody try to radar gun it. Well, they radar gunned me whenever I was a kid, but let's see, what was I, in 8th grade? Summer before the 8th grade, or was it 8th? Yeah, summer before the 8th grade. I threw the ball 68 miles an hour. There's a couple of kids in our thing that threw it faster than that, and then of course the senior leaguers are throwing it faster than that, but woo, big deal. Anyhow, Radcliffe struck out at least 3 batters in every inning for the rest of the game. High school boys played the old-fashioned game with 9 innings. They play only 7 today to give the boys more time to study, as if they were going home after a long ball game and crack open a chemistry book. So the 7th inning stretch is actually the end of the game now. But before you think that every Poet batter struck out, you'd be wrong. In all, only 10 balls were touched by a Poet bat, though. 7 were fouled off. 1 Lanier batter managed to get a hit, so it wasn't a no-hitter. Rebel coach J.E. Richard commented on the single safety by charging it to an inattentive fielder who was too accustomed to watching Radcliffe playing the game all by himself. So he said somebody got a thing because he wasn't paying attention. 2 other balls were mishandled by Hugh's teammates for those errors. The Rebels played 10 runners and won the game 10-0, though. The Macon Telegraph's very brief account of the game credited the Poets with 2 hits and 2 dropped third strikes by Rebel catcher Witten. So it's not Whittle, it's Witten. I thought, oh, maybe that's is that the old man that called about it? No, okay. Word of 1 in a million feet got out soon, and scouts from colleges and professional ball clubs descended upon Thompson like flies at a church picnic. These old baseball veterans saw Hugh pitch, and then they drooled. They had plenty of opportunities to drill too, not since Schoolboy Rowe and Bob Feller came into the limelight in the early 1930s had such a young pitcher drawn so much attention from the area. Scouts from the Detroit Tigers, the Indians, Reds, Senators, Yankees, Pirates, Athletics, and Crackers came to watch the sizzling sensation. So they were all vying for him a little bit, scouts from there. And my dad said that he had made a comment to somebody, or they said that he did, that he wanted to go to the Tigers, but that may have just been the first people that ever talked to him, and these other guys did. But there's more to the story. Hold on. At the end of Robert E. Lee's 8th game of the season, Radcliffe posted a record of 6 wins and no losses. On May 19th, Radcliffe took the mound to face nearby Griffin High School, I told you about. 2,000 people showed up for the game. It was a high school game. The right-handed hurler didn't disappoint the crowd. 25 Griffin batters were sent back to the dugout with a K by their name in the scorekeeper's book. That wasn't one of my dad's, but I'll get to it. Radcliffe had an off day, giving up 3, but his offensive game gave him 18 runs, so the outcome of the game was never in doubt. Radcliffe boosted his season totals to 210 strikeouts in 81.67 innings, or 81 and 3/4 innings, or 2.57 strikeouts per inning, an astonishing 23.13 per game. During the senior season, he threw 3 no-hitters, allowing only 18 hits total and giving up 3 unearned runs for a mind-boggling ERA of 0.37. During that magical season, Radcliffe had struck out 50 consecutive batters and 97 in 4 9-inning games. By the way, Hugh hit .450 that season as a batter, other than pitching as well as he did. By the way, my dad's supposed to be somewhere in this 50 consecutive or 97 in 4 9-inning games, because he faced him 3 times in a row. So he would be like 26, 34, and 38, or 41, or whatever it is, and out of those numbers, they played against him. I don't think he said it was a no-hitter. I don't know, but he also did mention this guy pitched no-hitters, that nobody could hit off of him. That my dad's best effort was fouling off on him, and he realized he wasn't getting. Once he finally hit one and got a piece of it, he realized he was so late, right? So his idea was to choke up on the bat a little bit, and then try to swing a little early whenever he knew it was coming. And as soon as he knew it was coming, he started swinging, and he felt goofy, like he swung way too early. Strike, still missed it. Rarely did people get a hold of this ball, and if it was a wild shot and he threw it past the pitcher, it could break open a board. When we were playing, we had a kid get hit in the head, and it knocked him down. It kind of knocked him out for a minute, and then they replaced him for the game and everything, and had his parents take him to the hospital, which it didn't do nothing but cherry his ear. But at the same time, I remember asking my dad, man, that sounded like if he threw it real wild and hit somebody in the head, he'd take their head off and stuff, and he would knock somebody clean out. Didn't ever hear about that happening, but he told me the stories of him. There's a little bit more to that, though. Hold on. With all the praise and accolades piled upon him, Radcliffe's high school career came to a disappointing end. He lost in front of 4,000 fans in the first game of the playoffs, 8-6. Many of them came to the game. 26 buses parked out in the parking lots and down the streets. The scouts blamed it on the team and their 9 errors, though, not due to their highly sought-after prize, who struck out 24. So, he still did a damn good job. It's just they gave up too many runs, too many errors. The Philadelphia Phillies won the bidding war between 14 teams for this guy. Satisfying Hugh, especially with his mother, the young fireballers were assigned to Philadelphia Phillies Wilmington Delaware Club with a $40,000 check in the bank to start. Radcliffe pitched well and was moved up to Toronto. Soon, Frank became the property of the New York Yankees and enjoyed a brief stint with the big clubs before returning to the minor league with the Syracuse Chiefs, Kansas City Blues, and the Birmingham Barons, in addition to assignments in Binghamton and Beaumont. Well, what they're not telling you in there, and I don't think they do in the rest of this, so I'll get it in there and we'll go with it from there, is somewhere in that stint where he's hooked up to the New York Yankees, they had supposedly those Detroit Tigers try to get a touch of him again. And so what they did was, it was a minor league game and they had him come out and pitch. Now they were talking to him early on in the game, and he was supposed to come out and just finish off the game, give him a little show, kid. So they were going to let him warm up real good. Well, they talked to him for a couple of innings. Then all of a sudden in the third inning, he started warming up, and they already were getting hits off this other guy and da-da-da, and they were like, well, come on, kid. And he had supposedly thrown less than 10 pitches. I don't know how that works, but less than 10 pitches, and this wasn't the time where you could come out to the mound and then throw about 15 pitches and then say, yeah, I'm ready to go, or anything really yet. In fact, reasons like this is pretty much the reason why, because this kid was slinging hot, and that puts a lot of pressure on things in your body, and he came out cold here, and supposedly he went through one batter like he was nothing. And then all of a sudden, the next batter, all of a sudden, he threw a pitch that was a little bit wild. It looked like he tried to throw an off-speed pitch. He kind of clenched at his arm a little bit, casualed for a little bit. Nobody compared it to him. Tried to throw another ball. Didn't do too well with it. They called him off of the mound. Got over there, hey, you okay? Oh, something hurt my arm. They go, well, don't screw it up. So they took him off of that. But he had popped a tendon, kind of like a Tommy John kind of situation. And though he was still able to pitch after that point, he was kind of a shadow of his former self, and all of a sudden he lost his superpowers. He wasn't pitching over 100 miles an hour anymore, but he was destined to be in that maybe 90 mile an hour range, which a lot of people were reaching at this time, from what I hear. So he threw his arm out, was what my dad said. And that also was reiterated by my dad again one time, because I started trying to learn a slider and a curveball, and he said, you have a natural slider when you try to throw a curveball, because a curveball goes the other way and you got to do this, and you whip your wrist, and it's not a good idea when you're a kid, especially to do it. Even adult can screw up and even throw out their arm, and then what are you going to do? So I'd stick with your little off slider thing and your deal, and that's really all I had. Hey, but we had signs 1 and 2. Anyhow, so Hugh Radcliffe didn't make it to the current National High School record book. I guess they didn't go back that far, really, when they made them, or they just didn't have folks like Millard Whittle who remind them of the spring day nearly 60 years ago when a Dexter boy became the king of the strikeouts, king of the Ks, or they called him the Wizard of Whiffs and the Sultan of Strikeouts. Not the Sultan of SWAT, that was Babe Ruth. So here's another picture of him, and that's in that New York uniform. So this would have been just prior to the fact that he threw his arm out. And then he was still able to go on after that for some, but all of a sudden he went back down to the minors and came from there. But many people who were experienced to him actually claimed that he was the fastest pitcher that they had ever seen in their life, and that he was the phenomenon that was the next big thing. And once he threw his arm out, that really lost its luster. When I was growing up, of course, it was Nolan Ryan and his fastball. You know about that. And that brings us kind of full circle in this whole thing from there. But my dad actually batted against this guy. He was only a couple of years difference in the same playing baseball. No, my dad didn't do that. He went into Air Force and did everything else. But this was a story he had. You ever heard about this guy, Hugh Frank Radcliffe? And I always remembered that name kind of weird. Of course, he repeated it to me about 3 different times. That's it. But I remember that name, and of course Hugh is weird, and then Frank, Hugh Frank. You know, why you got them have the middle name in there? Well, a lot of these people would use their middle names sometimes and things like that back in these days. And I just remembered it from that and this fast pitcher that he had that, oh man, he was the Nolan Ryan of his time, but he threw his arm out. So I just thought I'd give a moment to tell you the story about that. I could tell you a bunch of other stories my dad told me about growing up in the area and things that went on like that, but no real brush for greatness. This is one of the big ones that he had for there, that there's this kid in high school that nobody could touch. He could zing him right by you, boy. And in fact, whenever we were a kid in the 70s and 80s, and then all of a sudden that song about baseball used to come on, and about how somebody, boy, and Joe DiMaggio, and he could really zing him by you and stuff. My dad thought of those people. He reiterated it one time we were listening to it. I was asking him questions about stuff. But shortly thereafter, I didn't go to the senior league. I started playing high school athletics and got in football and got on the golf team and stuff, and got to be second seed on the golf team, second seed on the tennis team too. Then I cracked my collarbone, and that kind of ended that little fun there. But yeah, maybe I'll go into that one time in a whole another video and do some more shedding for y'all. But yeah, check out this kid, man. Yeah, at one time he was the zinger, man. Dad said you could just whenever he'd throw the ball, the way his arm would just whip, and he's just whack, and you know you had to start swinging before he let go of the ball almost. It was amazing. Anyhow, ever heard of him? If you have, leave a comment down there. Anybody from a rural town in Georgia that I mentioned in there, leave a comment down there. Peace.